The distortion of language, thought and culture was now well underway. The word bomb was not used. Officially it was a gadget, and the first explosion was to be called a trinity. And if this bomb was successful, it would be called a boy, and if it failed, a girl. Partly to cover up the growing dissent from Einstein, Szilard and others, which might have stopped the atomic age, Oppenheimer and his inner circle on the Manhattan Project were asked to become propagandists. In this remarkable propaganda film, they act out the last minutes before the first test explosion.
The automatic control's got it now. Rob, this time the stakes are really high.
It's going to work all right, Robert, and I'm sure we'll never be sorry for it.
Minus 10 seconds. Minus 5 seconds. Now!
Incredibly, dance band music was played, and an official report rushed to President Truman said, "The explosion had a beauty that cannot be described, the beauty great poets dream about." 21 days later, a plane called the Enola Gay took off for Hiroshima, in spite of the fact that the Americans had broken the Japanese code and knew the war was all but over. Military Intelligence Director Alfred McCormack said later, "We were secretly mining their harbors, we had command of their skies, but still the bomb was dropped." Daily Express correspondent Wilfred Burchett was the first Western journalist to reach Hiroshima after 80,000 people had died in the first nuclear fire.
First of all, I'd seen plenty of bombed cities during World War II, but this was a very eerie thing. At first I thought there was nothing left at all. It just seemed as if, I think as I expressed it in the story I wrote at the time, as if it had been a city steamrolled out of existence. There was not rubble in the normal sense of the term. There was dust. It had been pulverized. The city was red dust where there had been brick. There was grey dust where there had been concrete. It seemed to me that there couldn't possibly have been any survivors at all, because all of it was a great waste. People were, they were really dazed. Nobody stopped to speak to anybody else. They were human beings, but you felt that somehow or other they'd become dehumanized human beings. They were sort of robots. Occasionally people were scratching away with their hands in ruins to try to find some bits of family possessions.
Burchett was on his own, while other reporters were being closely shepherded by public relations officers. Victims were carefully avoided. Hospitals were off limits.
A bunch of correspondents arrived. They were Washington correspondents who were flown out and were assured they would be the first ones to visit Hiroshima. And I met this group, and the public relations officer in charge of them was furious to find that there was a correspondent already wandering around. And he actually held a sort of a press conference, a press briefing for his colleagues in Hiroshima at the prefecture. And he dwelt exclusively on the great success of the bomb and the great power of the bomb, dealt with the physical effects of the bomb, but none of those correspondents visited the hospital. None of them, they were not interested. I mean, they were briefed not to be interested in what actually happened to the victims. So the question of radiation sickness was absolutely suppressed.
It is not surprising that Burchett's story was publicly denied. For 3 times as many people died in the 5-year period after the bomb fell on Hiroshima than on the day of the explosion, most of them from the effects of radiation. What we in the West got used to seeing was physical damage in Hiroshima. Even film of what really happened to the victims was suppressed. The film on the right of the screen represents what we mostly saw on newsreel and television right up to 1968. This film was shot by Japanese cameramen in the only hospitals operating. The Japanese film was confiscated and shipped to Washington, where it was classified secret and not released for 23 years.
The deputy head of the hospital, Dr. Katsube, explained to me, specifically, we don't know what we're dealing with. People come in, the symptoms are standard symptoms of dizziness, loss of appetite, hemorrhage, internal hemorrhage, diarrhea, and then later there are spots, and there are the final stage before death is the hair falling out and bleeding from the nose, from the mouth. And the symptoms are similar to that of acute vitamin deficiency. Whatever we had available, we started giving vitamin injections. But where we put the needle in, then the flesh rotted.
The first target in Japan, decided a secret Manhattan Project committee, should be one that has escaped earlier bombardment, so that the effect of a single atomic bomb can be ascertained. Official truth? The bomb was dropped to end the war. Unofficial truth? It was an experiment. In Tokyo, the military held a press conference to deny Birch's story about the new dangers of radiation.
The officer giving the press conference was Brigadier General Thomas Farrell, who was Deputy Director to General Groves, who was in charge of the Manhattan Project. And he was denying flatly that there was any such thing as atomic radiation, that people were suffering from this. He conceded that maybe the people that are dead there, they have died through bomb and through blast effects. He said there may be a few who suffered from radiation from the gamma rays released at the time of the explosion. That's all. But there are no residual radiation effects. There can be no residual radiation effects. The bomb was exploded at sufficient height to avoid that. I showed him what I'd seen in the hospitals and what they told me in the hospitals, that people who had not even been in Hiroshima were dead and were dying. In the end, all I can assume is you form the victims of the Japanese propaganda.
In fact, for all of Japan, the rate of leukemia suddenly increased by 50% and stayed at that level until the 1950s, although this was not reported at the time. The official truth was quite different, and even as propaganda was extraordinary. Here, in the New York Times, the War Department denies categorically that the bomb produced dangerous radioactivity. Today in Japan, they are still dying. This is the atomic bomb hospital in Hiroshima, where last year, as every year, more than 1,000 people died from cancers resulting from that one bomb. In 1945, the unthinkable was acted upon. As a result, perhaps 500,000 Asians have died often slow and terrible deaths. What is truly unthinkable is that it now might happen to us. This was America after the Second World War, victorious and rich and untouched by war. This was Russia at the same time, victorious and utterly devastated. In 1946, former Vice President Henry Wallace revealed that he had warned President Roosevelt that the U.S. military were planning what he called a preventative atomic strike against the Soviet Union. In 1949, a Russian bomb was exploded, and arms technology soon dominated both American and Soviet economies. In America today, the military-industrial complex helps to keep alive some 22,000 major corporations. New weapons mean an endless cycle of competition and profit. In the Soviet Union, the military is the most modern and national and respected of all institutions, to which much of the nation's resources are mortgaged. In both countries, nuclear weapons like space technology are linked in the public mind with national